Welcome everyone to Salve Women. Today we're going to talk about work versus labor, or labor versus work. And this ties into my article appropriately entitled that. And it really had to go into rolling after Labor Day. And I wanted to really shed some light on the difference between the two. And I come from a background where, for me, it's very deep in understanding the difference between labor versus work, because unfortunately, to no one's fault, when you're surrounded by those who just continue to labor and they run into disappointments in life, no matter what. And we're going to go into the Newton's laws that I had talked about in this article to really give some analogical sense to it, because for me, that's how I see many things in life, and how I make sense of things is how to analogize certain parts for my understanding and reflection. And so when it comes to work versus labor, I recall many times hearing, if I had just, and this doesn't come even from my just immediate family members, but other members that I would hear, or those, friends of the family who would say, if I just won the lotto, I'd never have to work again in my life. And that always had like a scare tactic to me, if that's a deep word, because for me, it was like, what would you do after? Like for me, it was more of like having this childish mentality of, wow, I wish I could do more. I couldn't wait to really get to have that opportunity to do so much, because as a child you feel a sense of powerlessness, of this innocence around you, where you're thinking to yourself, man, when you get to be grown up, you get to do things. And then when you hear things like that, it can be quite disappointing to the spirit, the heart, the mind, and perhaps then the body lingers and thinking, well, what is there to have after, if you do have $1 million? And back then perhaps that was a lot, and maybe it's still a lot for a lot of people now, but it used to really have me thinking, that's actually scary. What would you do after that? And so I'm going to really pinpoint to me what the difference is between labor versus work. And I'm grateful to have this mindset, and again, no comparison to anyone else. It's just more of how I see how things have progressed in my life. And I'm hoping that by me being open and my heart being open, that you could truly have a sense of some understanding of where I'm coming from, and that it has given you and sheds some light into your life, and making you think in the light of positivity, and walking away or veering away from any darkest that are trying to come in. So for me, labor is you're just going about it, right? You wake up, you do your thing, you go ahead and labor, and then you go back home, and it becomes this cyclical mentality of, you get paid, you go ahead, do the work, you go get paid, you pay the bills, or whatever it is. And that is many of our lives. And yet for me, I would think to myself, I remember as a student, and I just felt like, now, okay, I get to do what I have to do, but then when I go home, I get to really work into the things I love to do, which is being with my kids, being with my husband, and really fulfilling that plan I have in my head of creating this fantasy world of what I've wanted always in my life to venture and push toward and work toward, and making certain that we have this true partnership. And I was so grateful to have that partner in my life still to this day, really thinking about how could we work toward what we've always wanted. And so for me, labor is this sense of dissatisfaction, and that's perhaps a strong word, but perhaps there are those who can truly relate to that, and thinking, I just go ahead and do what I have to do. There's really nothing about it after a while. And there's no brain to it. There's no purpose to it other than get it done and then be ready for the next day. And for me, I have to go into Newton's laws with this, because I really see the three difference of Newton's first law, second law, and then third law. First law is anything has potential to move, in more or less words. And so something's always idling, and it's kind of like waiting, right? It's like this deliverance that is ready to go, but it's having the understanding that, hey, if you just push me, if you just really get to, believe that I can move, I've got this potential, just like a rock. And I had signified that in my article that, you could have a boulder, it looks totally innocent. And yet when he gets moving, it's ludicrous time, move, get out the way. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, everyone, this thing's on a roll, get out of its way because it's coming down. And that is really that force equals mass times acceleration. And that goes into Newton's second law, which I think a lot of us can relate to. And perhaps that's the ubiquitous one, because, it's ever existed in our understanding that if there is some push to something, there's that force, regardless of its mass. If there's movement, it will continue to have movement. And so we essentially think that it's like, gosh, we just have to keep moving it, have to keep moving it, have to keep moving it. And that is where I think there's this conflict, or where we start to really run into this face-to-face of the first law, and then the third law coming in is right there in that second. And I don't know, Sir Isaac Newton could probably disagree with me in how he looked at it, but this is how I've understood his laws. And just really when we got into that force equals mass times acceleration, if you don't give it movement, it's back to the first law where, yes, there is potential there. You saw perhaps there was potential that now it stopped moving. Now it's just idling. And when we go into that force equals mass times acceleration, and there is this activity happening there, all of a sudden, some of us get disgruntled, some of us get disappointed, some of us just really fall into this mindset of, look, I've been pushing for some time, okay? And then nothing is happening, or that it's rolling, but then it's going in a different course, and this is not what I anticipated to happen. Now everything's amok, everything's in chaos, and I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to completely give up, or, the end of this, and then I'm going to move on to something else. And then this is why we have so many unfinished types of ventures in our life. And look at the painting that I have next in my life. There's always something, right, that you want to go, okay, I want to push for that, I want to push for that, I want to push for that. And sometimes it's just going to be a blank canvas until you go, I got to do something with it, though. It's got to move. It's got to have that it has the potential to be something. And yet, have I done anything to make it something? And my movement is, it's up. And so I'm going to stare at this darn thing until I have I start to put in what I said I was going to put in. And then eventually it'll start to come to be something, just like I was able to do that painting sometime over the summer, because I said, it's going to happen. You're going to make it happen. And so for me, when you get into that third law, this is where a lot of us may or may not have ever been, because it's quite a fear of itself, right? That false evidence appearing to be real. And where we think to ourselves, well, when we get there, we're going to end up having opposition. And am I really ready to run into that opposition? I ran into it with the second law, right? And there were some things that caused me to deter from what I was going toward, or that I got discouraged and I stopped. If I keep going here with the third law, where anytime that there is, for every action, there's a reaction, you have to anticipate that there's always going to be something trying to stop it. And that is just the law of this physics that Sir Isaac Newton was saying, is that you're running and you got this wind that's slowing you down. You know that you could go faster, but today's a windy day and your hair's all over the place. It's in your eyes. For those of you who've seen some of my workout videos, I'm like, sweat in my eyes, hair everywhere. Who cares? Because I have really, really gotten to that age now where I think to myself, you've been here before. You've had times where things were just all over. Your eyes are, just straining from the sweat, and your hair's all over the place, or that you have gotten some people to perhaps say some things to you that they didn't mean to, or maybe they did unfortunately mean to, because they wanted to slow you down just so that they could catch up or be in their third lap while you're in your 10th one, or they were hoping you would trip so that maybe they could surpass you. And then all of a sudden you're saying to yourself, hold on, this is me though. This is my heart, my mind, my body, and my spirit. holding me back from just going forward. And yes, there's going to be some obstacles. Yes, there's going to be many, many things that are holding me back from ever finishing. But guess what? If I keep pushing that, I may never get there, but darn well I will be close. And then when I spoke of the, this Elon Musk and Rihanna and all of those people who continue to work, there are many people out there. Like I've told my students, there are many Mariah Cares, there are many Michael Jordans, there are many out there who perhaps are better. And forgive me, not to really take away from all the greatness of these others that have done amazing things, that have obviously gained the respect of what they've done. But then at the same rate, you wonder how many people stopped at the second law when the things got rough, when the things got tough, when things all of a sudden got too much. Then they were like, I'm done. I'm not going to push forward. I remember Kobe Bryant was, always known for being ahead of everybody else. And there was something that I heard about. There was something about him where considerably dark, where there was just never enough. He just wanted to keep going. But I think that's that work piece in us to shed light into that and pull it back to positive, that positive light, and that we have to ask ourselves, wait, hold on, what's more? What's more? What's more? What's more? And what's more? Because our purpose is within, and there's something that's always going to stop it. And even if some of us are still trying to seek our purpose, we don't fully know our full destiny yet. But if you keep pushing forward, and I again go back into Denzel Washington, where I have quoted him in the past of just falling forward. That was my mindset, is like, you know what? I'm going to fall forward no matter what. And eventually I will get out of where I don't want to be and end up close, or even right there, or, in the center of it all, or maybe even ahead of where I would like to be. And that idea really got me through in all of a sudden being this immigrant, not having any background. I kid you not, I'm going to do an article of not even fully understanding that you had scholarships for anyone that was, just around 3 point. I thought you had to be a straight A student to really have a scholarship. So I didn't even bother looking. And yet, all of a sudden I found ways to just keep, pushing against all of these things that were telling my head that you couldn't, until at the age of 22, I was able to get my certification, teacher certification, along with my bachelor's degree. And that was with me 2 kids already. And then all of a sudden, being able to buy a home with my husband, and just being able to stay at home within the early ages of my 20s. And it was never anything that I said to myself, wow, I'm going to just go ahead and rub that in other people's faces. I honestly was just doing my own game. I was doing my own race. When you are running your own race, you don't have time to look to your left or to your right. You are mainly focused in on what you're trying to push forward to get to. And sometimes it may be unclear. Sometimes you're not certain, have I arrived there yet? But just like anyone who's ever raced, I told my own children who have ever done the track and field, where I tell them, don't stop until you get past that yellow line or that, the tape, because you may think that you've won. And sometimes you'll see some children, perhaps, some racers that haven't fully grasped that until you have actually passed it, your time has not stopped yet, or your placement has not been indicated yet until you've actually passed the line where they've said that you've finished. And so for me, I'm always just making sure I get to that finish. And then when you get to that finish is then when you ask yourself, what more, and what more? And that is that love for work, that, okay, there's more in me. And so I'm already used to running into obstacles. And yes, darn it, some of them are going to be hard. But I've also run into some hard times as well. And so, yes, if I could do these little hard times, and if I anticipate that the times are going to be harder in the near future, I'm just going to keep going. And no matter what, you cannot allow people around you who may be afraid for you, or because they've had discouragements or disappointments in their life, that they're going to be the ones to tell you, oh, honey, just go ahead and do it this way instead of that way. And then you have to look at their life and go, well, hold on, I could do more than that though. If you're content with it, by all means, all your blessings to you. But at the same time, there's more to me. There's more work to me. And so is $1 million is enough for you? Great. But at the same time, are you worth more? Absolutely. And so for you to really get into that Newton's law of understanding that there are different categories you could place yourself in, I'm really hoping that you say to yourself, I'm going for that third law every time. And maybe there are times where I take a nap and I just kind of go back a little bit and think to myself, right now I'm just idling, but think it through. Envision your dreams, envision your purpose, envision your destiny. And then guess what? The next day, put some, force into that. And with whatever mass that you're running into, just keep going forward, move on with it at your speed and push it a little bit faster. And you never know, you could be going, at the top of the hill. It could be so hard to push that boulder yet when you get to the other side, then guess what? It's ludicrous all over again. And so, in the words of Rihanna, work, 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 work. Was that 5 times? I think I read that lyric. It was 5. Just truly, truly dance your life off and have a good time with it. Even if there are moments where you're not so sure why you're dancing, who cares? I used to say I could be on aisle 9 in a grocery store and still find some joy because it's right here. It's right here. It's really just you moving on forward in just pushing yourself and really saying, if I have the potential, which you do, then you can. In the words of my mother, God bless us all. Hopefully I've given you some insight of what I think is the difference between work versus labor. We feel sometimes life is laborious, but when you get an opportunity to keep working and to keep doing you, then go about it because you are truly a masterpiece in the making. And at the end of it all, you want to be able to say, hey, look at that. I may have made some pieces here that needed to be remolded. We all know when we play with clay or so, sometimes we add a little bit of things here and there. But at the end of it all, you can look and go, I'm a masterpiece that I've always known I am, because you are. So embrace yourself, and we'll see you next time. Again, in the words of my mother, God bless us all. Have a great day. Keep loving you, keep doing you. Work, 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 work. Have a good one.